good evening. In cold December days like this, it certainly is wonderful to sit down by the fireplace and enjoy a wine of good age. But although this situation is perfect, it is not complete without a brief hint of a history lesson. This is Thomas Cromwell. He is the chief minister of Henry VIII, which makes him the most influential man in England during his lifetime. As a man of low birth and horrid family conditions, nobody would have dreamed of seeing him in the position he is now. Nobody would have dreamed of seeing him succeed. But he found out the key to success: knowledge and the Renaissance ideal. But before we can dive into who this man was and how his actions and premises crafted his situation, we need to get to know the bigger picture, the Renaissance. The Renaissance was a period between 1350 and 1600s and began in the city-states of northern Italy before spreading to northern Europe. As almost always in history, even today at a certain extent, the social life throughout the Renaissance was heavily affected by different classes, guilds in society. There were farmers, craftsmen, nobles, peasants, and so on. The generic thumb rule was that everyone except the farmers were rented citizens. Especially bankers and businessmen was a popular group that flourished in this time period. The classes were undoubtedly managed by one's economic situation. Farmers did, for example, wear simple clothing and ate simple foods, while the nobles feasted upon multiple dish meals and coats of the finest Italian leather and cotton. The classical system was even so enforced that a peasant would not be allowed to buy what would be considered nice clothes, although he could afford it. Towards the end of the Renaissance period, however, classes became less appearance. Humanist ideas, the importance of the individual, led to increased rights to the people. The class system remained in place for example, Florence and throughout most of Europe, long after the end of the Renaissance. Hello. Giuseppe Rossi, you're a certified Renaissance person. What are your thoughts around the economic situation during the Renaissance?
Yeah, after the bubonic plagues and several bubonic plagues that didn't really disappear, right? We had some great loss in population in our city-states, and in my city-state, Florence, we went from 110,000 people to 50,000 people in a matter of years. So that led us to a change in especially agriculture, since we had to go away from wheat that could feed a lot of people and over to more fine wares such as olive oil and wine and other finer grains. And also it led to more specialization for the city-states. For instance, Milan, they could focus on the arms trade or creating arms and weapons, while Venice and Genoa both had a great trading increase, and that made them very wealthy. Especially Venice became wealthy due to their trade with the Ottomans, which were Muslims, and other Europeans couldn't really manage that trade. In Venice and in other Italian city-states, we could focus on the arts and the humanists. We could study the humane as fields of study, and it was really a flowering of culture in our land.
Okay, thank you for your time. It was pleased.
Pleased. Ciao.
But how do all this relate to our Thomas Cromwell? As mentioned before, there were a lot of different city-states in northern Italy. Each one of these sought after an increase in power and prestige, and this desire was often attempted fulfilled through warfare. In Europe at the time, there were two powerhouses, the Kingdom of France and the Holy Roman Empire. These states wished to further their influence, and since they were in many ways rivals, they often backed different city-states in times of war. The Kingdom of France did, for instance, march an army to Italy and fought Holy Roman troops at the Battle of Galligan. Kingdom of France did, for instance, march an army to Italy and fought Holy Roman troops at the Battle of Gallignano.
Garigliano.
Garigliano. Bara en sista gång måste jag räkna. The Kingdom of France did, for instance, march an army to Italy and fought Holy Roman troops at the Battle of Gallignano, 1503. In the historical novel series called Wolfall, award-winning author Hilary Mantel presents a sympathized and credible story about Thomas Cromwell's life. Due to an alcoholic and abusive father, he had left home at the early age of 15. Being a bright and clever boy, he had again passed away with Flemish traders heading to Antwerpen. In some ways or another, he had enlisted himself to the French army as a mercenary, and he fought in the Battle of Garlingo at the 28th December 1503. Since this battle ended in defeat for the French, the 18-year-old Cromwell found himself wandering the Italian countryside, bewildered and alone. From the battle side north of Naples, near a town called Gaeta, he made his way northwards, and the following year he ended up on the doorstep of the Frescobaldi family, a merchant and a banking family of Florence. According to the Italian novelist Matteo Bandello, who were based in Florence at the time,
Frescobaldi is said instantly to have taken pity on him and invited him to stay in his household, where he provided clothes and money.
During his time in the Frescobaldi household, he learned about ledgers and how to balance numbers. He worked his way from kitchen boy to competent banker. But one day, having gained both French ability and a taste of the proper Renaissance culture of Florence, he decided that his time had come to return to England. His path took him once more to Antwerp, but this time he was not some frightened 15-year-old runaway, but an experienced young man with the skills required to make it in the wool trade. He made business contacts, learned languages, and thrived. Eventually, he returned to England, and after establishing himself in the English cloth trade circuits, he became Cardinal Wolsey's close friend and agent. The Cardinal was at the time tasked with nullifying the marriage between Henry VIII and Catherine of Aragon, and arranging a new one for the king with Anne Boleyn. Since Wolsey had not managed to make this happen, he was in a vulnerable position, and it ended with him being distanced from the central power. As the cardinal agent, Cromwell had gained a name for himself as an intelligent, effective, and somewhat cunning guy, and gained quite a lot of influence over quite a lot of people. Cromwell feared that he would lose his influence. With help from some of his contacts, he managed to maintain a place in the House of Commons.
From this position, Cromwell carried on with his business until one day, with the help from his friend and admirer, the Attorney General of England, he was readmitted to the inner circuit of King Henry VIII. By 1531, Cromwell had taken control of the king's legal and parliamentary affairs. By 1532, he had instigated talks between the king and members of the Protestant Church from Germany. He had also manipulated the House of Commons into an anti-clerical mood. He had made sure that an archbishop supporting royal supremacy over the church was elected, which made it possible for the divorce between the king and his wife, Catherine of Aragon. As a reward for making this possible, Thomas Cromwell was appointed as the Chancellor of the Exchequer, which made him responsible for all the financial and economical aspects of state in 1533. Later the same year, the king married Anne Boleyn. In March 1534, Pope Clement VII decided that the marriage between the king and Anne Boleyn was invalid, and in response, the king declared that the Pope no longer had authority in England. In November, King Henry confirmed Thomas Cromwell as his principal secretary and his chief minister, a position he had held in all but name for some time. Cromwell was sympathetic towards Protestant preachers and Protestant writers and invited them to England. They were to aid him in his continuous discrediting campaign against the Catholic Church. He also sent letters to every church to preach in his supremacy over papal power. Due to this digital project's time limit, it will not be beneficial to go into further detail about the life of Thomas Cromwell. But if you are interested in learning more about this ever interesting person, I would really recommend you to read the historical fiction novels written by Hilary Mantel called Wolf Hall. Since Thomas Cromwell is a man with a name with a lot of controversy surrounding him, I would also recommend you to visit SpartacusEducational.com, which is, to my understanding, a webpage of high esteem covering historical subjects based on solid historical sources. The facts we wanted to emphasize in this project were that he started from the very bottom of the wealth and power scale of England and climbed to the very top through his wit and skills. Some of these skills he was born with naturally, like his oratory skills. Others, the ones that carried him the farthest, were his skills in numbers and economics and so on, which he acquired as a direct result of the Renaissance culture in northern Italy and especially in Florence when he visited the Frescobaldi family. And this learning culture that you found in northern Italy made him into a master of numbers, a master of rhetoric, politics and interpersonal affairs. And that in turn gave him a broad spectrum of reason and intelligence to meet the challenges that faced him in his lifetime. Thanks for your attention.